Hafa, good evening and welcome to PNC's News. Now we're broadcasting live in Guam and in Saipan. I'm Janella Carrera.
And I'm Clint Rigel. Topping your news tonight, Tropical Storm Bobby is moving away from Guam and the Marianas. According to National Weather Service forecaster Mike Jobro, Bobby actually split up into two parts, with the upper level of the storm passing over Saipan and Tinian and the lower level passing over Guam sometime around 9 or 10 p.m. last night.
The atmosphere is three-dimensional, so sometimes upper-level winds get stronger than the surface winds, and that can separate the parts of the storm. So you might have the upper part going in one direction with the lower part going in another direction.
And that's exactly what happened yesterday. Tropical Storm Bobby actually split into two parts, with the top part, or higher elevation part of the storm going north, and the lower elevation, or surface winds of the storm, going over Guam.
The part of the storm went up with the heavier rain and showers, went up towards Tinian and Saipan, but the low-level part of the storm went over Guam around 9 or 10 last night.
In fact, the lower level of the storm ended up passing directly over Guam at around 9 or 10 last night. Guam ended up getting about 50 to 60 mile-per-hour winds, but Saipan and Tinian got about 70 mile-per-hour winds. Over the weekend, the NWS issued a typhoon watch before downgrading it on Sunday to a tropical storm warning. NWS forecaster Mike Jobro explains why.
And now the reason why we had that typhoon watch out, because the early indications were that it was going to be like in the upper level of what tropical storm conditions would be, but it could have crossed the line a little bit, so that's why there was we had a typhoon watch out, because it was just in case that it was that.
So where is Tropical Storm Bobby now?
Right now it's to our west, and that's about maybe 200 miles west of us, and it's continuing on to go westwards. The forecast track has it going over Luzon, but I'm not certain how strong it's going to get when it gets there. Probably not as strong as they usually get.
Jobro says it's rare for storms or typhoons to come through the Marianas this time of year, and he says for now the horizon is clear.
Well, we checked in with the northern villages of Dedido and Jigo as computer models have the storm tracking mostly north of Guam. Fortunately, there wasn't much damage to report other than some downed trees and ruffled vegetation. Rain and some minor wind gusts engulfed much of the island by mid-morning to early afternoon today, but there wasn't much to worry about as Tropical Storm Bobby was speeding away from Guam. Over in the northern villages of Dedido and Jigo, we checked in with the mayors to get an idea of what it was like during and after the storm.
Well, there's quite a few fallen trees, but not as big as some places, I guess. There was one that where a tree fell down and kind of broke a telephone line. That was bad. But other than that, everything here in Jigo is pretty good.
Mayor Machinani says he and his staff went out early this morning to check on villagers, and for the most part, everyone was safe and sound. In fact, in areas known for flooding, residents there seem to be doing just fine.
That's something that I'm thankful about. The rain wasn't as bad, because there's a lot of places here where it gets flooded pretty bad.
Dedido Mayor Melissa Savaras echoed Mayor Machinani's sentiments, saying because Bobby was mostly wind and not a lot of rain, flood-prone areas were spared of some major damages.
But there are a lot of trees because there was a lot of wind. Small trees or big trees as well, that did go down because of the wind. Last night I had a down power line that was sparking on the road, and the road was wet. GPA, of course, responded. We had Guam Fire Department that's also there, just to make sure my staff was there to direct traffic so that nobody got, injured or anything.
But
overall, everything's okay and the people are safe. Thank God.
Both mayors emphasized that it was through the partnership of government agencies that they were able to respond quickly to problem areas during the storm.
And while the island of Guam was spared from typhoon-strength winds, the winds were strong enough to knock out some power in some villages. Guam Power Authority spokesman Art Perez explains that some vegetation ended up taking out some power lines, resulting in some power outages in certain pockets around the island. Barragata, Manilao, Anigua to Asan, Talafofo, and Ninarahan were without power. Vegetation along Cross Island Road came into contact with some lines resulting in the power outages last night. Today, there were about 155 customers who were still without power, like those along Happy Landing Road in Tumon.
For parts of Tamuning, you have areas of Limits Hill and also one area up in Jigo. Tamuning more in the central part of the village, and one area by Jigo and by Santa Rosa area, Mount Santa Rosa area, back road, Route 15 area, that's still without power right now.
And GPA spokesman Arpez also reminds the public to be careful when using backup generators and to follow the instructions as per their owners' manuals.
Machinao, Estumbo, and Maria Joa elementary schools opened up and took in residents who sought shelter from Tropical Storm Bobby. And PNC's Rizal Romanes visited 2 of the shelters this morning to see if there were any problems and to ask about the turnout.
Hundreds of residents headed for shelters in the north as Tropical Storm Bobby was making its way towards the Marianas yesterday. Before the governor declared the island in condition of readiness 1, the Joint Information Center opened up 3 public schools and advised residents who live in low-lying or flood-prone areas to either move to a designated storm shelter or seek shelter with relatives or friends in safe homes. Estumbo Elementary School Principal Derek Santos says their school usually has the largest number of residents to come in for shelter. They were expecting about 400, but he says because Bobby was a tropical storm and not a typhoon, only about half showed up.
Most of them felt that as the storm winded down, it was better off to go home and seek, their comfort of their home.
Maria Yajoa Elementary School also had a lower turnout than usual. Shelter manager Dennis Malilay tells us that transportation for some residents was a problem.
I feel so much for the shelterees coming. We had a family walking over from Piga subdivision. They were with 2 small kids in the rain coming over here with a stroller and a newborn. Of course, we gave them shelter. We have a mayor who's great and who's actually driving them back to their residences. So as we speak, she's doing it right now.
Dededo Mayor Melissa Suarez explains the issue.
The problem that we had was transportation for families that couldn't get to and from. Lucky enough, I have a van that was able to, or my staff was the one that went to pick them up, the residents, take them to the shelter, and now we're taking them home. DPW wants them to go to the mayor's office, and then from the mayor's office, they'll pick them up and take them to shelter. If that's the case, they're going to walk right past the 2 shelters before they get to the mayor's office. So we don't want them walking, especially those with young children. We don't want them walking in the rain or on the road.
Aside from transportation, it looks like everything went smoothly at the shelters. Rizal Romanes, PNC News.
Tropical Storm Bobby may have well passed the island by now, but it left us with large swells, hazardous surf, and rip currents. The National Weather Service says a high surf advisory and a small craft advisory are in effect until 3 in the afternoon on Tuesday. There will be hazardous surf of 9 to 12 feet on north-facing reefs and 10 to 14 feet on east-facing reefs today. There will also be a high risk of riptides. NWS folks advise boaters, especially those operating smaller vessels, to avoid sailing in these conditions. In fact, the National Wildlife Refuge was closed today because of rough water conditions. Meteorologist Landon Aidlet was out during Core 1 yesterday, and he tells us about his experience.
Starting through Tagaching Beach, Pago Bay, and then worked my way down to Inarahan Pools. And depending on which exposure you're looking at, the waves were pretty phenomenal, especially at Tagaching Beach, taking the full brunt of the easterly large waves. As far as going out into the water, if you don't need to be out, don't go out. If you don't want to, choose another activity.
And Eidlet says high seas are expected to gradually diminish tonight, and they should fall below hazardous levels by Tuesday afternoon.
The father and son robbers of the Jigo Bank of Guam were supposed to be sentenced today, but because of Tropical Storm Bobby, their sentencing hearing was rescheduled to this Thursday. Irvin Muñoz White and his father, Jackery White, were arrested in January after Irvin gave a voluntary confession to the 2014 robbery while he was in the custody for the Days Inn robbery. Both Whites implicated a third person, Edward Baza, but Baza was acquitted of the crime earlier this month when a 12-panel jury found him not guilty. Meanwhile, Jathan Tatao is still doing time for the crime because he too gave a confession last year. But Tatao may be cleared of any wrongdoing as police now believe he may have given a bogus confession. Again, Irvin and Jackery White's sentencing was postponed to this Thursday, March 19th at 9 a.m.
All right, now let's check in with Blake Watson to find out what's ahead in sports.
Tropical Storm Bobby is out of here. We all survived, right? We've survived the storm. Now it's time to get into condition of readiness sports. Core sports, that just means get ready for sports. Rugby recap, boys basketball recap. Sports is action-packed, yo. For real though, show up, sports.